You guys are good. Can I get a round of applause for the band? You guys are amazing. This is the No Name Band. They don't have a name until I name them every month. I often forget to name them now. Say it again? Segway. Sandwich. Savory. Oh, gotcha. Savory, yes. We'll get to that later tonight. How are you, sir? You having a good time? Okay. Well, have another drink at this delightful bar, and your time will get exponentially better. How many people are out tonight to have a good time? Make some noise. That's right. We're all here to have a good time. Now, who's gonna help you have a good time better than you? Who's gonna love you better than you? Huh? Nobody. That's right, yeah. Who's gonna love you better than you? Nobody. That's right. I said, who's gonna love you better than you? Nobody. That's right, yo. Who's gonna love you better than you? Yeah. I be like, yeah, who gonna love you better than you? And outside love better than self never been true. You couldn't do it. Gotta find the love within. Yeah, they say that love is a sin, but that's not true. Yeah, I've been loving with the saints. They was like Baxter, love and anger, that's what it ain't. Sometimes love could change like a dollar when it break it makes change. Pardon me, I'm just getting ready, getting set up. They was like, yo, Baxter, knock it down, but then get up. They was like, I really like your get up. On the stage, watch them step up. This will be the poet, you know we gonna televise it. You gonna see some dope acts. Don't be surprised when somebody comes up on stage and starts prophesizing. Then it's a good time you haven't, you just realized it. Open up your eyes, kid. Yeah, you can see it. Baxter Wordsworth. In between the lines where I read it, they was like, damn, I could burn like a phoenix, a genius. Plus I'm coming back like I'm Jesus. Yeah, shout out to the band, they be killing it. Let me introduce them cause they real as shit. You can put your hands in the air if you feeling it. You can put your hands by your side if you kinda chillin' shit. But yeah, on the roster, the one on the keys is Simona Costa. Yeah, she gonna freaking rock it, messing with the keys like a locksmith. They was like, okay. Plus in the pace, we got Greek, he be strumming on the bass. You can feel it, yo, it's all up in your face. Please see, feel seated, up in the place. Wait a minute. And that ain't just that. Up in the back, you know where it's at. We got the ones on the percussion, his name is Snacks. Everything he do, it could never be whack now. Last but not least, I shouldn't say it. It's the one and only. Her name is Savory. She's always in the place when we be in the place. Yes, never basic. And for what it's worth, I should introduce myself, Baxter Wordsworth. I've been dope ever since the day of my birth. Until the day I return, back up in the dirt, they was like, yo, Baxter, you could come in first. Matter of fact, yo, make sure that you rehearse. I don't know, wait a minute, hold on. And that is just the power I exert. I'm looking at the light, trying to find the lines that connect them. They was like, yo, Baxter, it's an interception. They could feel it in their breath, yeah, it's so refreshing. Grab a microphone and started blessing. Coming to your rescue. Chilling on the bottom like a vestibule. All up in the attic, they be blessing who. They was like, they see him and they got him. I'm like Bruce Wayne, late nights, running over Gotham. Baxter works have been a problem. Plus, you do the math and that is how you solve it. I melt it down like it's a solvent. They was like, hold up, let's revolve it. Put your hands in the sky if you feeling the vibe. This is, the poet will be televised. Put your hands in the sky if you feeling the vibe. This is, the poet will be televised. Put your hands in the sky if you feeling the vibe. This is, the poet will be televised. Put your hands by your side, you feeling the vibe. This is, the poet will be televised. Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down.
Hello. Welcome to the Poet Podcast on Sky's Crescent Radio. I'm your host, Dale Novella, and we have a great show today about insecurities. And our esteemed panel is going to let us know some tips and tricks and some facts and stuff about all that. So ground yourself, get seated, and get ready for the conversation. I'm going to introduce our illustrious panel today, starting with Mr. David King. Woo!
Hello. I don't talk like that. Hi.
David King is an arts, education, and social justice advocate committed to youth development, cultural equity, and anti racist principles. He is an actor, director, poet, educator, curator, and facilitator. He is born and raised in New York and Queens, right, David?
Born in Queens, raised in Brooklyn, and then Queens again.
So does Queens or Brooklyn get the money?
Get the money.
Because they
Brooklyn
say
is
Queens.
Brooklyn is most responsible for all my New Yorkisms and fears. Queens is responsible for my joys. But essentially, yeah, I can't. I really can't choose one. But Queens has been better to me. I will say that.
So Queens gets the money. Awesome. Thank you.
If you want to do that, sure.
uh, Born and raised New Yorker from the ancestral lands of the Munsee, Lenape, Canarsie, and I'm going to mispronounce this. Excuse me, any
Matinacock.
Matinecock. Thank you so much, peoples. Um, yes, let's give pay homage to those who originally owned this land. He is the program director of school and community partnerships and Community Word Project. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable, co-chairing the Advocacy Committee. He is a 2019 Innovative Cultural Advocacy Fellow with the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, CCCADI. He is a member of Creating New Futures, an artist co-creating real equity, aka ACRE. And David graduated from Brooklyn Tech and earned a BA in theater from the City College of New York. He appreciates those who contribute to the process. Welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here once again.
Yay!
Yay.
All right. So moving on to our next guest, Miss Meredith Sherman, LCSW. Now, excuse, am I supposed to give you some other title like beforehand? Are you doctor or anything like that? I'm like not even sure.
No, I am not a doctor. Nope.
Meredith Sherman is a licensed clinical social worker working at Partnership with Children since 2015. Her responsibilities there include programmatic oversight of 4 community schools: Brooklyn Gardens Elementary School in East New York, PS 165 in Brownsville, PS 284 in Brownsville, and PS 298 in Brownsville. Additionally, Meredith manages implementation of the organization's CDF Freedom Schools programs. Meredith received a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and linguistics from the University of Michigan. After completing 2 years as a special education teacher in South Phoenix as a Teach for America Corps member, she went on to earn a Master of Science in Social Work degree from Columbia University. Later, she earned a certificate in not-for-profit management from the Baruch College Pace Engine. Am I saying that right? Pace? It's PASE, so I'm like... Okay. PACE Emerging Leaderships Program. Meredith has provided social work services to youth between the ages of 4 and 18, both in school setting and in youth development and arts programs. She spent over 11 years as program director at Groove With Me, Inc., and 2 years as clinical director of programs at Enact. Meredith was the 2008 recipient of the Pace Setter Award. She is a member of the National Association of Social Workers and the Partnership for After School Education. Thank you for being here, Meredith.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. All right. And moving on to our regulars. They're still phenomenal, but they're always here, and I love them for it. And first we have Mr. Mikal Amin. And I actually apologize. I haven't been giving people's pronouns, but Mikal Amin's pronouns is he, him, they. He is a master of the craft, the hip hop craft, a 20-year veteran of New York City's independent hip hop movement. He has toured 13 countries over 10 years as an artist, educator, and ambassador, a published essayist and scholar. He is also the co-curator and producer of Brooklyn Academy of Music's hip hop showcase, Word, Sound, Power, all caps with periods in between. It's Word, Sound, Power. That's what the name is. Thank you for being here.
That's how it is in the press. That's how we put it in press releases. Yeah.
How would you say it in your own hip hop?
That's it. It'd be loud. It'd be loud.
Right.
Yeah.
He is also my husband. So thank you for being here, husband.
If you haven't been following the podcast, hopefully you figured that out by now. Thank you for having me. And congratulations, Meredith. I understand you've recently had some achievements with some certifications. And David, it is always a pleasure to see you, brother. It is always a pleasure.
Always. The pleasure is actually mine, and I mean that for real.
Yes.
And just to like backtrack a bit with the pronouns, David's pronouns are he, him. Meredith's are she, her. Macau, I said he, him, but he, him, they. I'm she, her. And now moving on to one of our other regulars, Baxter Wordsworth. He, him. I think. If I'm wrong, you can correct me.
That's
is an
accurate.
MC and host of End of the Week, the longest running hip hop open mic in New York City, and the poet will be televised.
It has to say, you got to say
weekly.
You have to say weekly.
Okay.
Because there was one other open mic that started the week before End of the Week that's been going on as long, but it's monthly.
But it's not going on anymore, right?
I mean, nothing's going on anymore, but it would still go.
Stuff is still going on. Stuff's still happening.
This is a philosophical question because this is still going on.
This is still going on. Yeah.
What is?
True.
All right. Well, excuse me. The longest running weekly hip hop open mic in New York City, and the poet will be televised jam session for poets and the poetic. I don't know how many countries you've been in and rapped in, but it's been several.
Maybe like half a dozen.
Half a dozen.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
6 sounds impressive. Which sounds more impressive, 6 or half a dozen?
I like half a dozen.
Half a dozen? Let's say half a dozen. All right. Well, thank you for being here, Baxter. In your sweater.
Fan. Thank you for having me. This has always been a pleasure to do this podcast.
Awesome. And last but not least, our fearless leader, our producer, executive producer, Jade Zabrick, she, her. She is your friendly neighborhood troubadour, an Air Force veteran, native Texan, and the founder of Skies Crescent Radio. She has been a member of the Poet Will Be Televised band for 5 years, and she is also the leader of the Trainwalkers hip hop rock band. Thank you for being here.
I like that.
And hosting us.
Cool. Yeah. Welcome.
Fan.
Everyone, welcome to the show. We're going to go ahead and get into our first video from poet Nicole S.G. Oquindo. It's called Wake Up Call.
This one's called Wake Up Call. Smoke taking trips in and out of my soul. Gunmetal running down my cheek, leaving tears froze. Painkillers on the counter sitting right next to my time clock. Patiently waiting on the next hour while my mind is on lockup. You see, only a few would understand where I'm coming from. Demons dripping out of my nose like loose mucus. Knife wounds from my chest to my stomach, feeling gross, leaving me useless. But nobody knows about this pain I hide inside, so even when I cry, you won't hear me. Depression only seems to sink in when I'm standing on top of the world, do you feel me? So I light up the next blunt on the hunt for higher thoughts, praying for deeper blessings with this fake diamond cross I just bought. Dear God, do you hear me? Looking for answers because I'm lost on the ground with a crooked smile that at night turns to a frown. I'm down, lift me up, give my soul peace. I'm just trying to be found with my crown in the rust of Jesus' peace. And like the rain, my tears leave me soaked. Broken, searching for hope. Bright lights flash, I'm climbing heaven's rope. Gun smoke in my mind, but this time a blast of time rewinds to my better days. Wake up to morning haze, I'm awoken by heaven's blaze. Back to my hero ways, no more tears, only souls to save. Call me the hope dealer, here to save the day. And even with minimum wage, I give my all like it's my last day to live. Finally found, but still searching. No more hopeless daydreaming, my mom just boasting. Two-stepping in a fresh pair of white Timbs that I'm just trying to live. And since this world is so dark, my heart I'm willing to put in. Call me Chef Wonder. I'm jazzing the world with the different seasons I'm cooking in. Even when I fall, I spring back up. My winter heart warms up with summer love. No more wishing that my life would just end. I'm bringing back hope. I'm only looking ahead. Wake up call. Thank you.
Just a quick back announce that was Nicole S.G. Aquindo with Wake Up Call.
And I realize, as is tradition, we always tend to secretly squirrel away our host. But Dale Novella, entrepreneur, producer, singer, songwriter, and educator. Hailing from the South Carolina Low Country with a home based in Brooklyn, powerhouse vocalist Dale Novella brings soul, hip-hop, R&B, and rock vibes to everything she creates. An entrepreneur with a cornucopia of talents and ventures, she defies conventions and singular definitions. A woman who wishes to bring the world together through her songs, music, movement, and gatherings, Dale manifests live music events, like The Poet Will Be Televised, yoga, health, and wellness workshops, and is a youth educator who believes in the power of music and community with several institutions, including Community Word Projects, Building Beats, and the Dream Yard Project, among many others. A veteran of the NYC music scene, she debuted her self-produced record, Sang Bitch, in 2020 and has toured the U.S. and Europe extensively. That is our host and the extraordinary Dale Novella.
Well, thank you.
Cornucopia, good use of that.
I agreed. That was yeah.
That's why I asked him to write it.
Thank you.
Get nice juicy words like cornucopia.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sound fancy. So we just heard a lovely poem by spoken word artist Nicole Aquindo. And Nicole, I believe, has been diagnosed with clinical depression, which is different from insecurity and insecurity. So just it can be related, right?
Yeah.
They can go hand in hand. But it is a little different. So just real quick, the definition of insecurity is the lack of confidence or assurance, self-doubt. And emotional security is defined as the measure of the stability of an individual's emotional state. So what, my dear sweet panel, in your experience, can insecurity lead to?
Double dutching in. Well, fine. I'll just jump in. As soon as I read the question, the very first thing that came to my mind is stagnation. You know what I'm saying? Speaking from personal experience too, is like the biggest obstacle is feeling not secure enough to move forward and do something. Feeling like you don't have it all together enough to do. And I also find myself like impressed by people's sort of like audacity sometimes. It's like, damn, like I would never have done that thing that they've done. But yeah, in my experience, insecurity leads to stagnation.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and say also in my experience, it's what I found in times where I felt insecure or have been in circumstances and situations with individuals, be it students, be it in relationships, it also leads to poor choices in how you might move forward or in how you want to connect or to relate to certain things. I can definitely speak from my personal experience of missing opportunities, of not being able to determine if a situation really is healthy for me or not, because something with inside of me, and this is after years of suffering of in certain situations, circumstances, of you may not be able to kind of like separate yourself from certain things, be it habits, behaviors, or relationships. And a lot of that was born of me not feeling worthy of certain things, or assured that I understood what was actually happening around me. So, I think that insecurity is very dangerous because we all deal with trial and error. We all deal with successes and failures. But when we don't have the belief of, one, our experience, whether it's enduring something or just simply knowing that, hey, I've already accomplished X, or I've,
your capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. You find yourself being in positions where it could be as benign as simply just, hey, listen, go and you need to apply to this thing because, like, I mean, you do
Right.
a million things and you don't apply.
Right.
That's happened to me. Or, again, taking particular, basically someone, treating you a certain way and you just accepting it because you just don't feel like, well, I can't get anything better.
Right.
This is
So
what I deserve.
it's self-defeating too, right? Because like, yo, here's some crazy stuff. Like, I will have whole conversations in my head about like something that is definitely not going to happen, but I go through it anyway. There's been times where I've been like on the way to a studio to record a song, and I play a whole scene where I get like laughed out of the studio for being like being that whack, and it's like that's never even almost happened. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm surprised that
Yo,
fantasy is that extreme for both of y'all. For Macau is raising his hand, and
It's happened to me
Baxter.
too. It's happened to me.
Really?
Some
Wait,
version
David,
of that has
you
happened
rap?
to me. No, not rapping, not
Yeah.
rapping, but in other cases, including when I was doing. I mean, I don't like referring to it as the circuit. What is that? But like when I was, doing spoken word, especially in like the early to mid 2000s, New Yorican Bowery and whatever, and it's like in the whole imposter syndrome kind of thing, and then all of a sudden trying to claim or reclaim my sense of self and identity within that framework, right? Like, there's the cookie cutter and there's the stereotypes, but then there's like, okay, where am I? Where do I fit? Who am I and where am I within the spectrum? And really trying to carve that out for yourself, having the audacity, which I like that word was already mentioned, to do that for yourself. And when I hear about insecurity, I do think of a bit of duality, and I think I kind of live in a space of duality, for better and for worse, right? I'm trying to actually expand that now. But yes, on one hand, I think of a sense of jealousy, a sense of envy, and I'm speaking both in the general and from the personal, right? Like, and from the I. I think of collapse, like Baxter, you mentioned stagnation. Man, does that resonate, right? Like, so it could be something as simple as, how many times has this happened to me where, every year, especially when spring comes, right? Or early summer when the city is alive, New York City is alive, but whatever, maybe I'm still in my winter shape or something, right? Like, or whatever the thing is, I'm not ready. I spent 3 days, home, kind of not feeling the sun or whatever, just because it's the insecurity of my physical self or whatever. But on the flip side, I do think, and I don't think this exists just in a negative binary, but I do think of overcompensation. I do think of hard work. I do think of extra attention on diligence. I think of like me showing up to my neighborhood park when I first moved to Queens, like formally moved to Queens, instead of just visiting my grandmother in '97, and like this nerdy looking kid, who had my uncle gave me his baseball glove, and I just showed up to the park, and it took a while, but I sucked at first, but that insecurity of like, I'm not good enough. Why am I here? But I love this game so much, and I love basketball. I love the things I wasn't good at enough that I'm not doing to pull myself up by the bootstrap thing, but I'm saying I worked hard at it, right? I found out what lane where I was good, and then tried to build on from there. So I do think of that side of it as well, how it can be a benefit.
Yeah, I think you all really hit it on the head. And one of the things that I'm hearing from all of this, and my own experience, insecurity comes from fear, right? Like, that's the root emotion in insecurity. And then like alongside that, maybe because of our fear, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves about who we are and what we deserve or don't deserve because of who we are? I have lots of insecurities, and some of you all who are talking about being insecure, stepping up to the microphone, welcome to me today.
Yay! And you're doing it anyway.
Yay!
You're doing it anyway.
Podcast is already a success.
Of like, am I gonna say something stupid? Like, for real, you know, this is real. This is what we go through, and there's no reason why any of us here should be talking about ourselves that way.
Right.
We are all smart, strong, deserving people. Why are we telling ourselves these stories, making ourselves insecure? And where does that come from?
Right.
Yeah. And that's a good segue into my next question. What are the layers underneath insecurity? And is it related to our childhood and our formative years and whatever happened to us at that point?
Yeah, I'd like to jump on that really quick. I think it's a lot of different things. And earlier I was raising my hand not just from the performance standpoint, but actually those stories that I tell myself more often than not actually happen in the other professional side of my life as an administrator, as a writer, as a scholar. So David had mentioned something he just said about imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So I work as a researcher essentially at Columbia University through a project called Ciphers for Justice. And a paper that I'm about to publish was
that you worked really hard on.
And I'm sharing this because I think that one as a black man in education, and I think David definitely can relate to this. I've actually had this. I'm trying to out David, but we've had this conversation in numerous spaces about being one of the few black men that are administrators in these spaces, and what that actually means for us. And so with him talking about overcompensating, perfectionism, that's something that is a constant fight, because I often am in spaces inside of BAM where I feel like, well, I'm not supposed to be here because I don't have the letters. There's no one that looks like me. We won't even talk about my political stances. We won't even talk about my experience.
The way you dress, that's come up before.
Right. All of those things. So I think there's a racial component in many cases. I think there's a class component.
Yeah.
In many circumstances, and we have women on the panel, so I don't want to speak to y'all's experience, but I think there's also a gender thing that goes on as well.
Gender is a thing, depending on what. Yeah.
In addition to the childhood traumas, I know I'm the only artist really that actively pursued art in my family. So there was not really a lot of support. My father's expectation for me was I was going to be a lawyer. And in fact, there's a song that I wrote years ago that I still perform called To You, and I kind of referenced that. And it was a dream of mine as well. But I had other aspirations, I had other things that I really, really loved. And anybody that knows me or seen me, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm rapping, I instantly become like a kid in a candy store. I just love to rap more so than I love to read, briefs and affidavits and break down law. And I still love those things. But the point being is that there was not a lot of like, yes, Miguel, go find a stage and be an MC. It was like, why aren't you being a lawyer? Why aren't you going into more? So there was a lot of insecurities that I had to kind of overcome because of the fact I spent much of my formative years really kind of being my sole support, my sole cheerleader. And oftentimes what that meant was there was no support, there was no cheerleader. I just had to sort of kind of, well, I'm going to do it. And, kind of similar to what Dave was talking about being in the park playing baseball, is like, I don't think I'm that good, but I love this too much. So I'm just going to keep falling on my face with it. I'm going to keep just dealing with the demons of like, oh, I don't think I'm getting as many claps as the dude that just came after me. Or, I put out a song and there's like 5 people to listen to, so that means I ain't shit. But again, it's a lot of that going back to just not really having a lot of people in my life early on, and specifically family, just like, hey, you could do it. You know what? You get better, and like I'll work with you, or like, yeah, you're still great, and like it's gonna take time, whatever it is. I definitely think those are spaces that it comes from, having that particular type of love and support. Because you can get love from your family, you can get love that really is meaningful. And I had to learn this later as an adult, but it might not be exactly the thing that's going to like get you through certain adversity to kind of like follow the thing that you aspire to.
Yeah.
And what was that? But to piggyback, like, on what you were saying, one about the racial component, and also about like your family, right? Because it's like there's also some insecurities that are bred out of like, specifically, uh, me myself is like whenever I find myself in places that seem above, like where I'm othered, right? Like you're saying, like in your professional places, like I have this voice in my head that tells me to behave in certain ways to like make myself less, I guess, threatening or less whatever. Like I go into if a store seems like it has expensive stuff, I'm always saying to myself, I got to make sure I look like I'm not stealing, right? And it's like, where does that come from? One, because I'm definitely not stealing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not even a possibility. Like I'm not here to steal shit, right? But it's like I feel like our parents also teach us, especially young black kids, teach us how to behave in that way when we're young. Like whenever we go into places, like don't touch anything, don't wild out in here, don't do this, don't do this. So we have this voice in our head that says don't.
Mhm.
So we
Yeah.
like walk into a place and automatically are telling ourselves, yo, we have to make sure we don't extend outside of like the boundaries, right? Where like alternatively, I see like other people, other kids who are raised in like this other way, where like everywhere they go is like theirs. Like, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like,
What do you mean by other kids?
I mean, kids who probably weren't raised. It's a class thing and it's a race thing, right? Like on one level, it's like poverty teaches you that. Poverty teaches you like, yo, you have to be aware not to like go outside the boundaries of your station, right? But also like,
Yeah.
race in a certain way too. Like I see a lot of non-black parents that allow their kids the freedom to do whatever they want in any space that they happen to be in. And I do believe that breeds a certain level of confidence to walk into a space and not feel the boundary that like other people might feel in that space. Like, like me, every like when I travel, when I go to a different country, I'm like, what are the laws here? What's like, what I'm saying? What am I not
How
supposed to
many
do?
black people are here?
Right. I go into a museum, I'm like, let me make sure I'm not like close to anything I'm not supposed to touch. It's like there's this voice in my head is like, don't, like, whereas where when I said I'm like sometimes shocked by other people's audacity, is like I see other people walk into places without that like restriction, that have like this almost like boundless unjustified confidence. Like, you know what I'm saying? Some people who like, you shouldn't be that confident, but like it sort of like lends itself to you, like, and I
Yeah.
believe that's it's probably because like all of us have our, I don't want to say parents because it's not always our parents, but we have like authority figures in our head that tell us, like long before our parents stop telling us what to do, or our authority figures stop telling us what to do, there's still an authority in your head that gives you the boundaries by which you operate, and
Yes,
sometimes we're able to
definitely.
push past those and sometimes we're not, and it's like me, no matter how much I can rationalize it, I'm always telling myself, make sure you don't look like you're stealing, make sure you're not like, doing this, or make sure you're not doing that,
Yeah.
even like if we, even like before the poet, if I show up before you guys get there and I'm like sitting around, there's a voice in my head that says, buy a drink so it doesn't look like you're just sitting around, like, just because like black man can't go to a place and sit around and not buy something.
And I gotta
Like,
say, it breaks my heart. Not only to hear you say that, Baxter, but it breaks my heart to hear you say it and know that I've just had within the last few weeks conversations about, and years, right? But like with friends, are like, I do that too. It's that it's an extension of be seen and not heard, but it eventually
Mm.
morphs into be invisible in those spaces that you're not, um, we don't feel welcome for a reason. So be invisibilize yourself in those spaces where I'm not welcomed, and then dealing with that notion. For me, I'm basically 6'1", and not like I'm not some dainty thing, but I have felt multiple times, literally, I've asked myself on the street, feeling empty, like, did that person just not see? Do I exist? Did that person not see me? Am I not registered right now? And it's such a vapid, depressing feeling, of like, yeah, that I love the unearned confidence and gall and the audacity of existing freely, free of boundaries, free of the limitations. And I'll just say, I know, because I think we'll get into it later, so I won't go too much into it now, but I think we're absolutely socialized into this sense of insecurity. I do think you all touched on it, right? It's different isms, but I think um, as a black kid who grew up the first part of my life in Brooklyn and liked things that were not associated, at least externally associated at that time with black culture, which actually was and is ridiculous, right? Because we exist in all we
We exist in
culturally
all places.
there's no boundaries and limits to what we've touched in,
Mhm.
in American culture, but um I carried that sense of shame, or not necessarily guilt, but shame, like not pride, right? Whatever the opposite of pride is, to because it wasn't necessarily fitting in that box, right? That we had to fit in. Um, and even if we didn't fit in that box, even our own, and I don't want to overgeneralize it, but there is instances, right, in my existence where um, fellow melanated folks, it was almost like a calling, a different type of calling out. It was more like a pointing and laughing, and then that feeds the insecurity, and then that feeds the invisibilizing nature and all that too. So I just wanted to, kind of say that out loud too. I know Meredith, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you all just like defined, for anyone who didn't already know, what institutional racism and racial trauma has done as far as your own feelings of security and insecurity. I when I first heard the question, was going to talk about the roles that we play in our families.
Mhm.
But I think what you all are hitting on is even bigger, even bigger.
Can I
Well,
ask
we
you a
can-
question, Bear? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dale.
I think it's important. Sorry.
No, go
I,
ahead.
th- I think it's important that I do feel like in families of color, I can only really speak about my family, right? And my family's black. And uh yeah, there is like this tension where it's like we're only supposed to do these things. And it might not may not realize it comes from slavery, it comes from systematic oppression, but uh, there are these expectations, but there are also other restrictions that might inform our insecurity. Like I remember watching a video about birth order and how like your personality can be changed depending on your birth order, and like the oldest might feel like they're another parent to the youngest child. And I know for me that was a big thing in my life. They were like my oldest sibling was always kind of like looking down way more than my parents.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can talk about family dynamics wherever you think
Yeah, I mean, the roles that we play in our families can live with us way past our living with our original family, right? So for me, my stepbrother was 10 years older than me and had lots of problems. And so he played the scapegoat role. Like lots of the things that went wrong in our household, honestly, they were a lot of times because of him, but sometimes they weren't, but he got blamed for it, or he showed the symptoms of it. And me, even though I was 10 years younger, or am 10 years younger, I've always played the family hero. And look at me now, how many years later, and I'm a social worker, as the family
Right.
hero, I was taking care of stuff. I was making sure that I was getting good grades, and I was playing the sports and doing the things to like keep peace and perfection. And
Do you think you were compensating because your brother was so troubled?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think even like to this day, I continue to be like a caretaker, and I take care of communities, and I love doing it. But I do think that developed when I was a really little person.
No, that's definitely real. Like my girlfriend, if she doesn't mind me saying it, but like she was oftentimes like made to feel sort of like invisible in her family. And like even in our relationship, like sometimes we'll be out and she'll ask me something like, "Oh, can we go to the store?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, can we go to the store? Like I'm not the leader here. Like you know what I'm saying? You want to go to the store? Just tell me we're going to the store. Like I'm not here to make all the decisions. Like you don't have to acquiesce to me and everything that we're doing. Like but like that's sort of how she grew up, was like always uh making like always taking consideration for everyone else in her family and being sort of like the lowest person on a totem pole in that respect. So it's like, yo, I get it, but like when sometimes I'm like, just tell me what you want. Like everything doesn't have to be a question. Everything doesn't have to be like can we, or like, yo, if you want to go out to eat, just tell me like we're going out to eat tonight, but like it's hard to undo those things when that's the way that you've been sort of indoctrinated into socialization.
Well,
Yeah.
especially when you're not fully aware of them. I'm sorry.
Right. No,
No,
yeah.
I was gonna be like, Macau had a question for Meredith. But go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm getting, because I was going to ask a question and then it kind of steered away, but actually Baxter steered it back. I was just going to say, yeah, I think that as adults it's interesting because everything that I'm talking about that I understood or understand, it's super recent. Like within say like the last 4 or 5 years, even these were not profound things that I was like I could feel them happening, but did not know what they were in my 20s, even in my 30s. It's only been in the last few years, and honestly, with some help and insight from therapy, it's been like, oh, that's why that is the way it is. But I did want to ask Meredith, because you actually you are a social worker. You do practice as or not practice, but you have qualifications and you work with young people. I was actually curious, just like how do you kind of see that playing out in the role that you play in the schools that you work in as a social worker? Because I feel like you're seeing a lot of those things in ways that many of us on this are educators, so we kind of see it on a certain level as educators because you have to engage with young people, but then you have a whole different role and a deeper level to it, I feel, in your role. So I'm just curious, like how does that play out for you? Like how have you seen it play out in terms of with young people in the environment that you have them in?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't ever say you're just an educator. And I'm not sure if you said that or if that's what I heard behind what you were saying, but don't ever say that because you have just as much insight as I do. Don't let the degree fool you. As far as insecurity and security and the roles that students play, sometimes the insecure kids are the ones who fall through the cracks. They're the quiet ones who maybe they don't raise their hand. Maybe they're afraid to ask for help. Maybe they don't have so many friends. But also the insecure kids could be the loudest kids in the room. How many times is your class clown like really that's a defense mechanism for someone who is so insecure with what they actually have to say that they turn it
bully
into, or the bully. Absolutely. How many times is the bully the one who maybe last year was being bullied? So it's interesting to see how things play out. I think the times that we're in right now, sadly, all the loss that's happening is in the forefront, and things like insecurity or the roles that people play are kind of falling away. I think right now loss is the biggest thing that we're managing in our schools, and not just necessarily loss of life, which I'm in Brownsville. We've lost a lot of people to COVID, but also the loss of normalcy, the loss of like
Yeah.
getting to be a kid and play in the playground. And,
Yep.
you know, for how many months were the playgrounds shut down?
Right.
And especially in Brownsville, there's not really any green spaces. So all you got are the playgrounds. And those were shut down. I mean, there's the loss of, you know, your regular school day. So many of our kids were going to school only 2 days a week, with, you know, maybe 7 other kids in their class instead of 20 other kids in their class, or 25. There's so much loss, and it's showing up in so many different ways that I'm a little afraid of what that is doing for our kids' feelings of security and insecurity, and how is this going to play out when hopefully sometime soon things go back to a more normal experience. What are all those kids who've been at home for all these months, once they come back together, what's that going to look like? How is everyone going to relate to each other when they're right now only used to relating to 1 or 2 other people, or depending on how many people they live with, like they're only used to relating to the people in their home. So I think that's kind of,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, you're making me think of the role adults play. So, you know, when you were talking about the different roles in the room, the bully, the class clown, there's also then, okay, on a might be microcosm, even though we know classrooms are not necessarily too micro. The role of the teacher in said student's life, the awareness of a teacher and an administrator and a support team, or lack of that, right? So the what students are everything you said, Meredith, what students are currently going through, and what the world they're about to enter, and in some cases re-enter, but in some cases enter for the first time, right? It's a post world.
Yeah.
A lot. It's safe to assume that a lot of the experiences they're going to have will be shaped by adults, and we're seeing this distinction and dichotomy on one hand of adults acting very, in my opinion, selfishly and carelessly about uh, the generations behind them. And it's playing out in different ways with COVID, climate change, whatever, you know, economic insecurity, you know, all, yeah, so on and so forth. But also in New York City, this great diverse city, but the most segregated school system still in the country, where you got that not the NIMBY mentality, not in my backyard. So let's diversify these schools, or let's get resources to these public schools. Yeah, but you know, this is the yeah buts. But it's making me think about the role of adults and you know, us, some of us here in this panel, that will play to take our egos out of the foreground, right? To not lead with ego and um, be as diligent and careful and compassionate as we can in providing, not necessarily providing the way, right? Because we're not giving voice, right? That's a phrase I can actually be glad to get rid of, but giving platforms, if you will, offering up platforms for the youth to self-advocate, tell us what they need, and then our job is to figure out how to get them that. And in cases, right, we've all been there. We were all of age where, you know, like Cal said it earlier, I wasn't, you know, you said you weren't aware necessarily in your 20s and even 30s of what you were going through. So how are you able to articulate what you're not aware you're going through? So I understand that too. And thank goodness for Meredith and your role in the schools and what we try to do as educators in the schools. But you know, expression counts. A way to you know, one of the biggest things in my life, I'll end it here, is in the 8th grade, randomly, like our school, the school I went to wasn't an art school at all, but there was a poetry contest, and I just like, all right, I never wrote anything, like, all right, and it was, I know nothing replaces therapy, but it was therapy. So what resources, what outlets can we adults, um, like how can we get out of the way and not lead with our insecurities so that we can actually feed the futures, the presence and the futures of those who are going through this utter sadness and gravity, Meredith, that you're describing. That's standing out to me as well.
Yeah.
I
Can I
actually
say
have a thought for that.
Can I
Sorry,
say
Jen.
something real quick? Sorry. And then we'll get to Meredith's expert opinion. But when you said ego, David, recently I realized in my study as like a yoga and wellness practitioner and instructor that like the ego comes from our solar plexus, right? And it when your solar plexus is out of line, it can be underdeveloped, which is insecurity, or overdeveloped, which would be like your vanity, your all the bad things where you're overtaking everyone else, right? So like having that healthy ego and just accepting that we have an ego and it's just going to be there, and like I realize that that's something like we don't talk about enough, that like you have to kind of think about yourself and what you need and like feed your
Yeah,
ego so that it stays balanced,
I
actually, you
appreciate
know.
that. Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I fully agree.
Mhm. Yeah, that's something I like recently learned, just like trying to balance my own chakras, you know. So Meredith, your point.
No, I think that that actually like perfectly fits what I was thinking. Before awareness or a platform or any of those things, one of the things that I've been trying to do to get myself and my team through all of this is just leading with love, making sure that everyone feels like they are loved. And that means like I tell my staff that I love them. Maybe that is inappropriate, but I do, and I do love them. I'm blessed to have the people that I work with on my team, and because they know that I care about them, they are able to give that love in turn to the students that they work directly with. And I think that once you feel loved, even if it's just by one person, um, it makes a difference, and it helps you make that connection and bring that awareness and take advantage of a platform that someone might give to you. Um, so I think we're gonna all have to really lead with love moving forward.
Can I just say one thing? And it just really quick to what Meredith literally just said. I love the fact that because I know, and some of us are over 40, we're approaching. So I love the fact that the idea of talking about loving your students is becoming something that is a more normal, consistent thing. Because I definitely remember being in school and not feeling that explicitly or being even implied by principals, deans, teachers, anyone. And the fact that the conversation now in education is making that the standard. It's not everywhere clearly. It's not completely the norm, but the fact that that's even in a conversation, and that I know since I've become an educator over the last 15 years, that is something that is really being discussed, because I feel like in a lot of ways young people in schools are dehumanized, and one of the ways they are dehumanized is by kind of assigning them this role of student, as opposed to a young human being looking to find what they need so that they can feel supported and loved and move forward in this life. So the fact that that's something now in education, I'm a big critic of the American educational system. But I have to say, and maybe it might be in the small circles that we all run into, because this is a very exceptional group here as far as sort of the practices that we all kind of adhere to. Um, but it's becoming more common to whether we understand when what we're talking about, we're saying we love our students, or we love a colleague, but that wasn't something that would be even thought of 20, 30 years ago in an educational setting, but now that it's recognized it's necessary in order to get the best, in order to really help young people develop, I think is really a great thing.
And not necessarily a romantic love, just for
Right,
anyone
exactly.
who, like,
Yeah,
they hear that, they're
human
like,
love.
oh, that sounds a little strange, but like,
right,
you
right.
know,
What are
one
we,
of the other types of love,
Florida
like,
teachers? No.
yeah, right.
Well, and you know, and that's what's sad, right, with pop culture, right? Because just the idea, and it's funny. There's a meme that's going on about, you know, do you tell your, and this is specifically to talking about black men. It's like, do you tell your brothers that you love them?
All the
And
time.
it sounded so, yeah. I mean,
But even the fact that you have to ask the question is like,
right. It's like
yo, but like, you know, that it's pop culture. It's also Americanized, where like the only love that exists is sexual love, right? Like that's
Yeah,
the only,
yeah.
like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like you can't just be like, yo, I love you, and have it be like innocent or normal. Like, it's,
Yeah.
oh, you love him. Like, what is that? Gay? It's like, no, you can just love somebody. But to piggyback off of Macau's point and Meredith's point, when speaking with kids and insecurities, is like we exist in such a brand new frontier of personality, a brand new frontier of like understanding yourself. Like Macau, when we grew up, the reason why we never really address these things is because it's just you, right? Like if you wanted to get any of this knowledge, if you wanted to get any introspection on things, you would have to go and pick up a book, or go and talk to somebody, or go and like to even understand that there was somebody who might even go through something similar that you're
Right.
going through. It would have to be like by chance meeting this person out in the world. Like we exist in a world today where everyone is aware of everyone at all times. On top of that, kids are being forced, and I don't want to say forced, but they are being conditioned to profile themselves over and over again. Every time they join social media, every place they go, it's like, who are you? Create a bio for yourself. Create an identity for yourself. Like, you know, and like they have to definitively create themselves again and again and again. And it makes you hyper aware of who you are and who everybody else is. And sometimes that's a positive and sometimes that's a negative. Because I think today people are like way more empathetic, or way more aware that of other people's experiences, which is like, you know, to a positive. But people are also way more aware and way more value of their own experience. So like, you know, like somebody said, I heard this comedian was talking about like millennials, and he's like, millennials are so aware of their hangups, but the problem is that they expect you to work around them. So it's like they'll be on a job interview and they'll be like, yeah, so I have extreme anxiety and whatever, and it's like, and you know, you can work around that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Whereas like in our like the way we grew up, it was like, man, like I have anxiety, how can I still accomplish what I need to do, like in spite of that, right? Not
Hold
like,
up. Baxter, aren't you like in the first year of millennial?
oh yeah, I'm Christopher Columbus of millennials.
Oh my gosh.
wait a minute.
Oh my gosh.
Aren't both of y'all
1981.
millennial? Yeah, you're
I'm a
both-
millennial.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
never denied that.
But like,
Jade is a millennial.
But I exist in this weird,
I'm a
weird
reluctant millennial. But yeah.
I exist in this
Really?
weird place because like I remember completely like the age before cell phones and the internet. Like I
Yeah.
remember I was in a in a store today, and we, you know how sometimes stores have those programs where you get points for things, and if you put your cell phone in. So
Yeah.
my girlfriend was like, she was like, yo, we have a phone number, and I was like, do you know my phone number? And she didn't know it, and I was like, yo, B, I remember when I knew
had to.
every single person
Yes.
that I knew's phone number.
I'm not
Yes.
allowed in the house if I didn't know Dale's phone
Yo,
number.
I don't know.
That was the
He
thing I
tried
had
to
to
get
learn.
points one day. He made me a whole new account because he was 100% convinced my number was something else. I was like, I don't know whose
I
number
don't know
you
whose
just put
number
in.
that is,
I've
right.
been had this account.
Listen, I have to know dates, numbers, all types of stuff.
But I bet
yeah.
you, but I bet you know all your friends' Instagram handles, right? Like we don't know numbers
It's
anymore.
a new
all day.
world. It's
All
a
day.
new world.
Well,
Wait,
you
you
know
know,
what? Oh, go ahead, David. Go
oh,
ahead.
real quick, Baxter. Like, first of all, I co-sign everything you're saying. The distinction I would say is we're not necessarily aware of everyone's stuff. I think we're aware of we're aware of everyone's representatives, not necessarily their authentic or our authentic selves, but it's still based and grounded in everything you just pointed out. And I'm not going to take us down a different road, but I just want to back up just a little bit and say part of the love that Mikal and Meredith were mentioning, um, part of that love is, in my opinion, is going to entail telling the truth to our students and to our colleagues and to obviously myself. And part of that truth is, again, I'm not going to take us all the way down this road, but in the education, as Mikhail said, the American education system at large, but in New York City, I'll just keep it here in the nonprofit industrial complex within New York City. I'll put it to you this way. I saw the triangle the other day that a friend posted, a therapist friend posted. There's the perpetrator, rescuer, victim. And the victim always needs the rescuer, always needs the victim. Perpetrator always. So the nonprofits in my writ large here, educational nonprofits, don't plan for their obsolescence. Like we shouldn't be, there shouldn't exist as much nonprofits as does, or educational institutions, because we should already have something robust. We should have robust infrastructure that takes care of young people and ourselves, but it doesn't exist. So, but we don't plan for our obsolescence because we're complicit to an extent in perpetuating this system, because nonprofits need funders, and funders need to feel valued. This money needs to be spent. At least that's the approach. So part of the truth telling is there's shit that needs dismantling, and not just dismantling, because there's a limit to just focusing on taking down. But what are we? What can we? Right? What can we reimagine? What can we build? And there's folks that already exist. This isn't a new paradigm. There's folks that we've been ignoring generationally that have answers. So who can we then listen to and to do that? But I just wanted to say that out loud too.
It's in the name, brother. It's an industry. It's an industry. So there is no, and this is something that I deal with all the time, and I see that ICA coming through. You are cohort 3.
You better believe it.
cohort 3. We know what time it is. But yeah, it's funny, right? Because I think that when we're talking about love and support, it is telling that truth to the individual, but also developing. For me, I'll say for me, all of the young people and the mentees that I have, I'm trying to get them to a point, or help them and guide them to a point of self-determination. And what I mean by that simply is that you can subsist and exist beyond these particular institutions and systems. I do firmly believe that that's possible, and that's in collective action, that is in collective focus and thought, but it is also in some sense of individual development, learning, growing and supporting, but you need to actually be within a community for that to actually be a holistic process. And because schools are a place where we have to congregate in whole, then those spaces then have to kind of take on some of the things that we're all talking about here today. So that's why when Meredith was talking about that, it was so great for me, because it's like, yeah, that wasn't something that you would have heard about loving your students and openly saying that to the group, and that actually even going a step further and having to be in your practice, in your pedagogy. It wasn't something that was brought in. So yeah.
I love all these points, and we started tiptoeing into social media, so let's go ahead and see what Khalik Sim has to say about that.
Great, man. Y'all fucking great. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, let's get to it. Social media. Social media, the epicenter of prudent ventures. Like an indentured servant, I am the slave to unyielded scrolling. Echo chamber of frigid trolling. A sucker for blood-sucking Zuckerbergs of social herding. Petrified of the compulsive effects, I am reluctant to digitally socialize. Seized by an ambush of notifications, where has my time been taken? Down the valley of social engineering, where privacy is nothing but a delicacy of corporate intrusion. Social media, the breeding ground of political collusion. The platform where propaganda is camouflaged with trendy illusions. The platform where freedom of speech is no more than a figure of speech. A social network of empty self-worth. A place where moments are captured, where life escapes. Let me say that again, hold on. A place where moments are captured while life escapes. Social media. A digital drug without a scheduled classification. For some like me, immediate excommunication and rehabilitation are needed for a valuable implication. An implication is assimilated. Social media. A digital weapon for evolution. A platform of indoctrination and cooperation. A network of collective consciousness, a catastrophe worth the risk. An alternative platform that inverts the hierarchical pyramid. A course of action moving with rapid traction, social media. A double-edged sword being used by both the centralized and the decentralized, social media. Where the allied forces will collide with the forces of the empire. Choose not the platform of the proprietor. That's social media. Hey,
First we had Khalik Sim with social media, and then we had two of our infamous we could say infamous train walkers, Jade Zabrick, who is here with us today, and AD with Good Music at the Poem Will Be Televised. And originally, I wasn't going to play those two pieces back to back, but I kind of felt like they were showing two different sides of of a coin. We talk about media a lot. When we talk about the negative effect of media, and a lot of people do not push music into that little media bubble, but music is a part of media, right? It's a part of something that informs our everyday life. It informs our personality. It can create communities and so on and so forth. And so, like, the question I have is, does society monetarily profit from low emotional security? And if yes, what are some examples of that? But also, does society profit from, how can society profit monetarily or otherwise from high emotional security? I said I wasn't adding questions, but that is an added question.
I think a lot of that directly relates to what David was sort of talking about like, you know, things not planning for their obsolescence, but like sort of like hinging on the fact that like it'll always be needed, you know?
Yeah.
It's like self-help books, like, you know, there's always got to be somebody to help, or else what's the point of that, you know? And a long time ago, I I had a friend named Majesty who performed at the Poet Will Be Televised, who like gave himself to like helping other people, gave himself to like fighting for other people's like rights and things like that in a very selfless way. And but being around him and being in that space, it helped me kind of see like, yo, you can never really trust somebody completely whose livelihood is based off of helping your struggle, you know, because they always need you to struggle for them to have a livelihood, you know.
Yeah.
Like if once you stop struggling, there's nothing for them to do, you know. And it's like there's a lot of spaces like that, David pointed out, the non-for-profit spaces, like, you know, people look at like Al Sharpton and in those situations kind of like that, like what would you do if there wasn't people, if there, you know, people to help. But the same thing with media, right? Like they need there to be problems for them to sell you the solution. Medicine, they need you to be sick for them to sell you it's not the cure, it's the comfort, you know, because they never sell you the cure, because then, you know,
You best be careful speaking all this truth right here. Best be careful.
But I mean,
Zoom would get cut off.
But
this is a monthly occurrence, y'all.
But that works in everything. And I also think like, and then maybe I'm getting a little off on a tangent, like nobody ever sets you up for the work. You know what I'm saying? People sell you the cure, they don't sell you the process, which is the only thing that you could ever really be valued, right? It's like, I can't tell you how to be happy. I can tell you things that you can do to maintain your happiness. I can't tell you how to be healthy. I can tell you things that you can do to maintain healthiness, right? I can show you exercise. I can show you
How to eat right.
how to eat right?
Take your
and
vitamins.
it's like, but what we get caught up in is like, we always think we're gonna. Well, I can just say we. But speaking for myself, and what I imagine is people, I get caught up in thinking that you'll exercise till you get to fit, and then you'll be fit. And it's like, no, nothing works like that. Everything is maintenance. Everything is a process. So it's like, what you have to do is invest in the exercise, invest in learning how to habitually exercise. And then once you invest in that, the byproduct will be, then you will be fit, right? But if your goal is to get fit, like you'll get fit and then you'll stop and then you'll fall off and then you'll beat yourself up, and then the cycle, like, and that's like a lot of things, you know. And I feel like that's what media sells us. Media sells us, you want to get fit, you want to be happy, you want to be rich. Like, this is the answer. Not like, do you want to develop the habits that'll, you know, get you happy? Do you want to develop the habits that'll, you know? But yeah.
With the fit thing, I feel attacked. I just want to say that.
Listen, I'm attacking myself. So
I'd rather give it up. Mikhail, I see you wanted to see.
No. I mean, honestly, there's really not much more I can add to what Baxter said. I mean, I would just be saying the same thing in my own words, because I mean, that's really it. It goes back to what you were saying as well. It's just, there's a way that people will make money, and kind of going all the way back to what Merida has kind of identified, that what's rooted in insecurity is fear, right? And that's what you're profiting off of: fear of missing out, fear of not being included,
Was
fear
that
of not
FOMO?
being.
That's FOMO you're talking about?
Yeah, sure, yes, absolutely. So now we also have YOLO. But now I sound like a millennial. Way too many acronyms in weird
But
tech
you
stuff.
married one, so it's your
You
fault.
you're right. No, you're right. True. You're right. But in all seriousness, no. But yes, and it is unfortunate because there is something to be said about once you have the process, right? Once you recognize, people talk about this all the time, like within the dieting industry, where it's like you're not supposed to diet; it's a lifestyle change,
Yeah.
right? And that's what
Yeah.
you're trying to do. But one, there could be quote unquote in industry and profit from that, because we all need a constant guidance, a cheerleader, a motivator, et cetera, et cetera. But that actually gets to the point of care and love. And that's not what capitalism is here for. So it's much easier to have these clients where you just ring them up. It's just like being on the park bench with with the work. It's like, get your fix. You'll be back in about 2 hours, and I'm just gonna keep running it up. But I don't want to sit there with you and like, well, let's walk you through the whole thing. And you have some systems like that, but ultimately it really is just like, yes, I'm trying to maximize profit, so I need the most amount of people to run through these doors, and just to kind of like maintain that sort of cyclical thing. Because the dirty side of that in terms of capitalism is like, okay, yes, we need market, we need people to buy, but you
Yeah.
also, the more insidious part is, I need to minimize my cost. How do you minimize
Yeah.
cost? Well, if you're only coming to me every 5 minutes, and I only have to invest a certain amount of resources in you because I'm not investing a certain amount of hours in you, then that's
So we have
actually
to bloat the problem.
bloat the problem, but also to kind of what Baxter was saying, you also kind of undersell the solution, because the real solution requires continuous, dedicated work. And if you're anyone who's in any type of healthy relationship, not just romantic, family member, friend, student, mentor, that's a long-term relationship of helping guide and develop growth, and going through the ups and downs and the unevenness of what it means to be human. That's not really profit worthy, right? So if you're in it for profit, you're just trying to get the money and get out. You're trying to minimize the amount that you actually have to give out, because then that's just more that you keep for yourself. So you're not going to have kind of like a healthy way in which you're doing some of these things. So what do? We create, this is one of the things about social media, in particular things like TikTok and Instagram, that I think about often, especially Instagram, because I forget exactly what David said, but David said something to that effect, but like, we're getting sort of like a representation of ourselves, of people, right? You don't see Instagrams that show like when your day's going bad, unless it's a joke.
Sometimes, but then some
it's a joke
people
meme.
are like, they're doing it for attention. They don't really feel like that.
Yeah, because it could be theatrical, right? It could be like
Yeah.
the drama of it all. But it's like those other days. It's like the day where it's not like I'm not crying my eyes out, but I'm also not happy, where it's like there's nothing to see here. Like, you never see that. You never see somebody just like unmotivated, sitting at the end of their bed, like just trying to like get themselves up to like go to work, or get themselves up to work out,
I feel like I want to write a skit now called Reelagram, and it's like literally like an Instagram where you actually, like, someone's actually posting what's really happening to them on a day to day, and it's like it's a lot. You know what I'm saying? But if you look at Instagram, if you go through it, I mean, it looks like
it's the highlight reel.
Well, it is the highlight reel, and honestly, it's staged. Even it's not even just the highlight reel.
Most of it is staged. That's been a big thing.
Right.
That's been sorry to interrupt. That's been a big thing recently, with people talking about how people who are Instagram famous have been faking their vacations, like just buying like backgrounds off Amazon, or like, or they go in their neighbor's backyard who has a really pretty pool or whatever, and they're like, I'm in Thailand. Like, no,
Because
you
they're
just went
selling
next
you
door.
they're selling you the solution, right? Not the
Mm-hmm.
solution, but they're selling you the idea of like this could be life, but not they're not you don't the work is how you get there, if you get there at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But think about this though, right? When you're seeing that constantly, now the flip side of that is you don't know said person. You don't know most of the people that you're watching on Instagram. So now you're having a different conversation and story with yourself of what am I not doing? I think there was like a famous quote, like it was something to the effect of like, we all have the same 24 hours a day that Beyonce does.
Yeah.
No, we don't, because Beyonce has staff. Beyonce has au
And
pairs.
before she had paid staff, her parents were acting like that. So.
Right, but we'll talk about the Beyonce we know, right? So like, you can't compare yourself to a Rihanna or a Beyonce or a Jay-Z or a
Diddy. People say that about
Diddy,
Diddy.
right? These people have massive amounts of resources to allow them to be their best self all the time or wake up just like this. But that's not the conversation that's had within the public. People are really trying to say, well, that's where I want to be and I'm not there. And instead of kind of thinking about it more critically and going, well, what type of support do they have and how realistic is it for me to have a similar type of support?
Or even rationally, right?
Right, they're holding themselves to that standard. It's like, you can't hold yourself to that standard.
Yeah, they're the exception. Like, how many Jay-Z's are there in the world? How many Beyoncé's are there in the world? 2, maybe 3, right?
I mean, that we're saying that as Americans. If you go to any other country, they have a Beyonce of whatever country.
But what I'm saying is, even if there's 10, even if there's 100, compared to the billions of people that are on this planet, like it's just not rational to think that no matter how hard you work, that you are going to I'm not saying it's impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's like you have to know that you are like you can't base your reality on the exception. You can't base you can't be like.
But that's precisely what we all most of
We're
us
socialized and
Right.
indoctrinated to do, and then there's a flip side to it, right?
For every Jay-Z,
yeah,
there's 100 Cormegas. There's
sure,
There's 100
but-
Baxter Wordsworths.
right?
This
But,
Cormega,
but
damn.
the other thing is, the other side of media, right? So not necessarily the social side, or not. I mean, now shoot, but since early 2000s or 2010s, there's the fusion of social media with news media.
Yeah.
Like I remember I used I watched the evening news with my mom, the local news, and then Tom Brokaw and whatever, and then all of a sudden, and the Today Show, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, why is this? My mom loved Entertainment Tonight and Extra and all that stuff, but why is this story on the 6:30 local news it should be at 7, right? It should be
Yeah.
on Extra Net, and then all of a sudden CNN. Wait, why is this a story on CNN?
Yeah.
And there's this fusion to now literally tweets are news story, or at least they're purported as news stories. When we all know that's ridiculous, but corporate news media is as complicit as anything here too. And I'm not trying to do this isn't a Trump whatever binary or Dem Republican binary. This is more of corporate news media has a role in why people don't trust it as much anymore. Like they're not this innocent, dainty presence that had no role in why, because again, taking them left right out of it, just how these 6 major corporations basically that own a majority of international news media project themselves and what's news onto us. The jig is kind of up, right? But even though it's entertaining, so they've kind of switched it more to entertainment and debates and opining, but they need the fix. So insecurity essentially is a drug. It's just that at what point does it become dangerous to people, right? At what point does a January 6th Capitol rushing happen? At what point does now we're talking about I forget how it's termed, but like it's a crisis, like the opioid epidemic. That's a crisis now pharmaceutical companies, as was pointed out earlier, I mean, look, I'm sure the profit margins increased, right? Like there's that, but on the same token, media's responsibility within that framework. Where were you in the 80s when the crack epidemic and the AIDS epidemic were demonized and whatever? You know, who's driving, who's dictating what's important, who's dictating what we should uh, where should we should direct compassion to. So it's just like insecurity is a drug, but it affects us in different ways, and it manifests in different ways within social media, within corporate news media, and even the actually I'll back up a little more and say, yo, it's still a story in 2020, 2021 that Black female anchors like can't wear their hair naturally in many parts of this country. You don't think that has a role in insecurity and people like viewers' insecurity, young women's insecurity, people, not just women, right? But young people's insecurity. Um, so yeah, it's rampant. It's rampant, and there's both a profitability with it, but there's also going back. I think the cows talked about going back to slavery. That enterprise over our shoulder. There's the we are the ones who dictate what is right. We are the ones who dictate who belongs. We are the ones who, you know what I mean, and everyone else falls under that. At least, that's what's expected of us. And things are different now, or I'm hoping things are trending in the other direction now.
How do we feel specifically about music? Because one thing I was thinking about specifically with good music, like AD makes these points where like he will go through a down period and then he'll put on a song that's like a friend. It's like a community. It's music therapy. We've all heard of music therapy, art therapy, all the different therapies, different type of therapies, right? But I remember music has that effect on me as well. But also, music kind of like puts some negative ideas in my head. And not necessarily people like to talk about the over sexualization of women in pop and hip hop and stuff, but not necessarily that. Like, being like 6, 7 and listening to Tony Braxton and Mary J. Blige, I thought those were normal relationship problems. Those are exaggerated problems to make a song good, to make a song sell. And it's like you're singing about these things and you never see we never talk about the real stuff, right? And most people don't think, oh, my kid can't sing an R&B song. Like it's just not like R&B is one of the safe music genres, right?
So I think the last time David was on the show, I think you had a feelings because I had categorized our relationship as mundane, and
Oh,
yeah, I think he was on that show. I say that to say, when you have a life where your everyday is just relatively even, right?
mm-hmm.
Not a lot of high peaks, not a lot of lows. And I think anyone who's in this podcast, I know some of you already that are in long-standing relationships, you realize like most of your time is spent kind of in a very like, okay, we're just doing the things and we have our little things. I mean, Dale and I sit around most of the time back and forth sharing like cat videos and like fawning over our Solomon, like just silly
Our
things.
Solomon. Oh,
Yeah, silly things he's doing, right? Like we spend literally, I would say, an inordinate amount of time being like, Solomon, what are you doing? Look what Solomon did. Oh, Solomon, are you okay? Okay, like that's like most of our day when it's not us, whatever. That doesn't sell. People want the exotic. They want the extreme. So yeah, absolutely. When you think about those things, we don't have a society that celebrates like wouldn't it just be nice to have a friend and a partner that you just kind of wake up and it's just mad normal. It's like I
yeah.
can set my watch to my day. I'm waking up, I'm feeding Solomon, I'm making breakfast, I'm making her coffee, she's waking up, she's going to go to work, I'm going to work, going to come back. Whoever's not teaching is making lunch, and that's on cycle repeat most of the time. that's and I'm sure like Meredith, you and Far have probably some version of that. I'm sure David with your partner, Jade with you probably have some version of that. Baxter with Kate, I'm sure you have some version of that. No one wants to. I do.
It definitely
Personally,
involves cats, that's for sure.
definitely all cats, but you know what I mean. Like, but you know, and these are some of the things that you don't learn about when you become an adult. Like a lot of adulting or being an adult, like the success is like having a stress-free, drama-free life. Like that's kind of probably the most successful thing you can do as an adult. Where you won is like, wow, I can kind of set my watch to what my day's going to be because the world is wild, the world is crazy.
The
I'm
world
not
is
saying
wild.
it is. Yes, you want to do something fun and exciting. I'm not saying like you sit around and just like play Uno and watch like the paint dry, but it's more speaking of like life is really kind of about like how can I just find some simple joys and how can I kind of keep things relatively even and balanced. But we don't celebrate that as like a goal or something to aspire to or something to
Hey,
celebrate.
let me flip this back to Dale, and I mean everyone. But like, does music have a responsibility not to contribute to our insecurity? Is it was like, and I'm not saying this as if I know the answer, but there's that thing about art, and there's art for art's sake, and art shouldn't have limits, and yada yada yada. But I wonder, should music be concerned about contributing to our insecurity? Or
Some of it should. I think, and this is me as a songwriter and someone who hid away in music for most of my adolescence, whether that means I was writing and performing or whatever, or if I was just, had my headphones on and cut off the world. Uh, I think music should reflect all sides of life. It should reflect, I can think of two songs that do actually show like just mundane relationships. There's an Alice Smith song and then an Otis Redding song. The Otis Redding song is Cigarettes and Coffee. And it's just talking about waking up with your loved one and having a cigarette and drinking coffee. And he makes it sound like it's the best thing in the world.
That sounds amazing. Well, not the cigarette part, but
Yeah, or whatever you smoke. If you don't smoke cigarettes, maybe your weed, your weed brownie, whatever. A glass of coffee with whiskey in it, whatever. That would be me and Macau. So, so I think music should reflect whatever is going on, and it should be true, and art should be true. And sometimes it is dramatic, and sometimes it's boring, and sometimes it's depressing. But I think it should be true.
does.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I'll hedge the bet on this. Honestly, I'd say to David's point, I don't think music or any art does have that responsibility. But what I do think does is the industry. And I think what we've done is what we've not separated those things so we think of them as one and the same. I definitely am a proponent of artists should say and do whatever they feel is necessary for them, and that art is there's a whole plethora of different types of expressions that are done through different mediums and forms. I think the problem comes in to Dale's point. I think what Dale is, I don't want to speak for you, Dale, but saying when I'm hearing what you're saying,
I'm a grown woman. I don't need you to talk for me. No,
right?
I'm going.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
it's something that I know you've talked about. I've talked about is this idea of like there's an imbalance in what the public is basically presented. So you don't get.
I got to stop you right there because that's it for me. Because to responding, I mean, I wasn't trying to play a game, but even hearing your response, Dale, it's not. I agree that I don't think it's the art that has suffered or whatever. I think who's presenting this, like who decided that in the mid '90s that we're going from quote unquote what we deem as conscious rap to party and lean heavily into club in the early 2000s because it makes money. It's not that people weren't making that stuff, right? But there was a decider. There was always a decider.
A gatekeeper.
There's always a gatekeeper. And that, and that's the thing. It keeps coming back. We talk about schools, right? We're talking about music. There's always multiple, but a gatekeeper. And I don't think that that should go without saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely true. But there's also like there's layers to it, right? Like nothing is just black and white, because there's also, you know, going back to like the pundits and how politics have been turned into entertainment, right? It's like nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, it is way more entertaining to engage the extreme than it is to engage like the moderate, right? Like you, when you hear people talk, you want to hear people have like distinctively contrasting like points of view. You want somebody to be like, you know, everything is evil, another person be like, no, it's all good, because that provides like an interesting debate, right? If somebody's like, yo, I think that there's complexities at work, and I think, you know, it works in one way and it doesn't in the other, and the other person goes, well, I agree completely. It's like, all right, well, debate over. You know what I'm saying? But it's like even with music, it's like it's easier to deal in the extreme for the artist. Like if I'm writing a song, if somebody says write a song about a bad relationship, right? If I'm like, oh, they hitting each other and like somebody set a car on fire, and like, you know, like that is easy to get people's attention. Now, if the more you get into the minutia, the more you get into like the details, like write a song about a bad relationship that they don't say anything to each other, or just like a car ride. Like, you know, write a song about a relationship that's ending at a coffee shop where not a word is spoken. And that's more detailed and more intricate and equally as entertaining, but I think it's more difficult for the artists to accomplish, you know, and that's why big action movies sell millions and millions and millions of tickets. And like, you know, art house films are, I think, as loved as like people love them as much, but they're not breaking the box office, like, you know, because it's like it's you have to engage it at on a deeper, more attentive level, you know. Like if you see somebody punch somebody in the face, you're like, oh, they're in conflict. I don't have to like guess, worry, like these people are in conflict. But if you hear somebody having a conversation about milk, but the subtext is that they're in conflict, like that takes more effort on the listener's part, you know. So
but see, I think though, what you're talking about is still something though that's learned, right? So like, I'm blessed to know who Alice Smith is because of Dale, and the beautiful thing about what I consider true genius is simplicity, right? So you're talking about like writing about a bad relationship. This song still will literally bring me to tears. There's a song Alice Smith put out about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, All Falls Down. And literally the chorus like, when it all falls down, will your love stay? And this and I can go into the lyrics, but the simplicity and the intensity in which she's talking about the fracturing of a relationship, and her talking about kind of retreading over and over the same arguments, the same missteps. And there's nothing in the song that's like, oh, and he threw all of my stuff out the window, or like I locked him out of the house in the pouring rain.
It's still a fantastic song. Yeah. It's just not single ladies. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Yeah.
Like, right.
That's my point.
But I'm just saying though, it's sort of like the reality of it is that a single ladies as opposed to All Falls Down, a lot of it has to do to the marketing. A lot of it has to do to who are the people that want to kind of like step in and just put whatever machine or whatever behind it.
Cause that's why when I started what I was saying is like that's definitely true, right? Like we get marketed specific things for specific reasons, like without a shadow of a doubt. But on top of that, there's a reason that the Black Eyed Peas are so like a well-sold band, is because like their music is surface level. It's like you don't have to think.
Chose that.
Right. It was like I have a feeling that tonight's going to be a good night. That's the record. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to go too deeper than that. It's not like I have a feeling that tonight's going to be a good night because my love is just coming home from, like, you know, it's like I have a feeling that tonight's going to be a good night. In period, you know? And it's like, how many people can relate to that? Billions of people can relate to that. Sells billions of records. But the more intricate you get, the more like delicate you get, I think you get as much love. Like people like add this Alice Smith song is like you love it to the point that is remarkable. You are remarking on it, right? But like how many people know who Alice Smith is versus how many people know who the Black Eyed Peas are? And
that's because of a gatekeeper, like we were saying before.
It's part of that.
Is that a fault thing? There's also like being careful of how we interpret success, and maybe that's not quite the word I'm trying to think of too, right? Because okay, there may be fewer people who know Alice Smith's song, but one can argue, or but the connection to that song is such that Mikal has the reaction that he does when he brings it up in this podcast today. So okay, there's not the breadth, right? But there is the depth, and is one, that's no fault of hers. Two, does that make her any less successful than the Black Eyed Peas choosing that simplicity, that surface level simplicity, right? So it's just back to, you said it before, it's nuanced, right? It's
Right.
not necessarily a right or wrong dynamic, but I don't know if it necessarily answers, Dale, your question about does music have a responsibility, or does it
True.
need to address it?
Well, kind of pivoting, we're talking about media, we're talking about does it profit off of our insecurities or our security? How does all of this affect our communities? And does it affect our communities systematically and within the government? Low security, low emotional security.
I'm just going to start off and say yes, and I'll say, because what I immediately think of is, and I'm not going to spread her business, but my mother, right? So she became a single mother when I was young, and she is super, like, competent. She is super talented and super competent. I don't care if, yes, she's my mother, I'm biased, but it's not bias. Like, this is a woman who knows how to get stuff done. Yet, um, what's the enduring what's one of the enduring things that we're seeing being played out today about Black women in leadership being undermined, or being dismissed, being neglected, being disrespected, or waiting for some guy to say what she just said 5 minutes before? Oh, that's a great idea, Barry. I don't know why I chose Barry, but I've seen it play out, uh, in specific instances with my own mother, and then it's like, how, I can't speak for her, but it's like, how could that not play a role in her, looking at herself, and how can that not play a role? And I know it did, because I'm speaking about me as a kid, seeing these silent dynamics at play, silent but violent dynamics at play, right? In real time, beyond theory, by the way, right? This isn't theory. This is like playing in real time in people's lives. So I'll just, yeah, that's what immediately comes to mind. I think absolutely it does.
Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, if you think about you guys, I'm not a musician, so I stayed out of that part, but I heard a lot about the industrial complex, all the industrial complexes, and who is making the decision, who are the gatekeepers of what gets out there. And the research, looking into it, it's mostly white men, right, who are deciding what's important and what is released and what is not released, what's put on the shelf. So yeah, all of our communities are affected by that, because for the most part, people who look like the people in this podcast are not the ones making the decisions about the media that is out there and who we are seeing. And then, like, to go back to the security insecurity, who we are basing our stories about ourselves on, and the messages that we tell ourselves about what and who we are, because of what we're seeing out there, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
It totally makes sense. And I'm sorry to talk again. I'm thinking of something that hit me a few years ago with the Harvey Weinstein thing, and it made me think. Obviously he wasn't the only one, but it blew my mind that him and a few others shaped, in essence, one, how women are portrayed within the industry to get work, but how they're perceived by the audience at large, the body politic, right? So it's not, three-dimensional. Yes, it sounds like a generalization, but essentially there's the over sexualization of women. There's the and I forget the dynamic, right? But like there's that thing of like what's there's a name for a movie that involves women that don't involve like talking about a man
Oh
and
yeah,
something,
I forget the name of it too.
yeah,
It's
right.
the something the pass the something test. I forget
Yeah,
the
it's a test. It's like a
Yeah.
right.
test, right? But like
It has to be
all these things.
At
Go
least
ahead,
two.
two
please.
women who talk about something else other than a
Right,
man.
and
At
Right,
yeah,
more than one scene in which
right.
two female characters will talk about something else other
right.
than a man.
And
Yeah.
then how many like the sidekick of color who's there for the moral support, but all
Or
these
the
Or the
things,
gay
magical
side.
or the
or
magical
the
black person.
magical Negro. So, and like I was leaning more into gender thing, talking about Weinstein, but it is this, like Meredith, yes, like not just on the gender tip, but like I realize a lot of my own experiences. Think about like MTV in the 90s, right? Like a lot of my experiences, as much as I like to think I believe in free will, I believe in self determination and all that stuff. However, I think a lot of my experiences were curated for me, and I didn't
Oh,
even know it by a
definitely.
silent hand, right? And that silent hand happened to be a white guy. So yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, because like we exist inside of a white structure, right? You know what I'm saying? And even going back to the the gender of it, like we exist in a misogynistic structure. So it's like there's no way you can't. There's no way you exist in this structure and you're not affected by it, right? The beauty of it, or I don't know if it's beauty, but the interesting thing about it is the internet has shaken things up so much, right? So the reason why a Harvey Weinstein can happen is because these things were happening in very specific like corners of society, right? Like if something happened with Harvey Weinstein or somebody, like who could they tell? Nobody would believe them where they're at. Right. But then the internet comes out and all it takes is for one person to tweet that, like, yo, this happened. And it's somebody who they never would have met and never would have linked with, be like, happened to me too, and then another person's happened to me too, right? And it's even our collective experiences as like black people. Like I don't know who was the first person pointing out the trope of the magical Negro, but I bet you it was probably some black people on the internet is like, yo, I'm tired of the trope of the magical Negro, and other black people being like, yeah, like this one and this one and this one and this one, and it has us in this place where like we're able to share our experiences and then pinpoint these things. Like we've all seen the movie Back to the Future, right? Like I don't know if anybody like when
Yep.
you I watched it with my girlfriend she saw it for the first time recently, and it's like it's always interesting watching people experience things that you think is like completely normal through like a new eye, right? Because she's like, wait, like he like his mother's coming on to him, first of all. Second of all, Biff tries to rape her. And then in the future he just ends up like working for them, like her attempted rapist is just you know what I'm saying. And it's like that shit is like it was so commonplace that they put it in a movie and nobody questioned it. Like it was like, yeah, she almost got raped, but water under the bridge. Like, you know what I'm saying? Even Eminem, I remember the song, like, he has songs where he repeatedly murders his baby mother with
Murders his
his
mom.
no. But this is the murders his baby mother, stuffs her in the trunk, like disposes of the body with his daughter, right? Which is it's crazy, right? But it's even crazier when you think about that. This is an actual person that exists in real life. He used her name. I don't know if any other person has been harassed as directly in popular culture as like that. Like Kim. This song is about me killing you, and I'm gonna sell it to millions of people.
Go to a
And
New York City poetry slam.
it was so commonplace. It was so. But I mean, like, but that's not sold to billions of
Yeah.
people. Played
And
on
people
repeat.
are still
Played on
buying
repeat
those
on
records.
on radio. Like he was the biggest artist in hip hop at a time. And
Yeah, and then he turned around and made Stan, and that's part of our culture, right? Like a lot of people say, "Oh, that's my Stan," and they don't even realize they're talking about an Eminem song.
But
It's just like a word now.
But my thing is like, so Kim, like she didn't have a voice. Like there was no like Twitter back then. There was no for her to be like, yo, this is my side of the story. This is what he did. So like we all kind of just like, yeah, Kim's a bitch. She deserved to get murdered, and this is my jam. Like, you know what I'm saying?
But I want to give human beings a little more credit. Like I do get your point. But you know what happened to in 91, 92? Like I see the internet as a tool here, just like video is a tool. When we saw Rodney King getting the shit beat out of him, but yet it didn't change. I mean, okay, the cops got acquitted, and we know what happened after that, sure, but it didn't change the legal, quote unquote, right? The justice system infrastructure didn't respond as they, in kind or whatever. But it did take, and speaking of getting back to insecurity, like, yes, the internet makes it easier for us to connect, but it still takes someone, whether in fear, right, definitely, for their own well-being and/or life, depending on the degree, and insecurity, to say, you know what, this person stood up. I'm going to step up, and then the groundswell still comes from, people deciding to jump in the fray, if that makes sense.
But what I would say is the difference with the Rodney King thing is because we couldn't just go watch Rodney King get his ass beat whenever we felt like it. It only aired on the news. We saw it. We were outraged by it, right? But it's like, but then it wasn't there anymore. Like today, people have
been saying for I guess my point is, Black people have been saying for generations that the cops were beating their asses.
Oh, yeah.
No one gave a shit. And even when it came on camera, the non-Black, or I won't do that, but people didn't give a shit. Forget 92, 91. We're seeing it in the last couple of years, right, with like finding reasons why that person deserved what they got. Yeah. So it's like, it's not like those are the system to your...
Imagine how easier it would be to ignore it if today you talk to somebody like, yo, they whipped Rodney King's ass, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, he probably did something, and it probably wasn't as bad as you're making it out to be, and then that's where it ends. But then the internet comes around, it's like, no, they whipped, and you're right, they're still denying it and stuff like that. But I'm saying, like, it's a lot. Like, we have to. Me personally, I have to decide to stop watching those videos. Like, right, there's so many of them, and we have access to them at any time we can. And I've got I can't watch another Black person being abused. I can't watch another person losing their life. But it's like, it's so much easier to disengage in whenever Rodney King happened. Like, right, you saw it on the news, but then your life went on. And you carried it with you.
That goes into personal choice. And I think McCalamine has something really, really profound to say about personal choice in the song You. So here's Where the Love Is with You.
We are the Where the Love Is, Miss Dale Novella.
McCalamine.
There you go.
God Body MC.
Let's go. Wanted to know who was on the ticker. Life's a little sweet, a little bitter. Once you gotta admit, both flavors put together make it richer. If it wasn't Twitter, would have never seen the Charles River under a million start speaking hard with some of the secrets who've been ripped paragraphs of foreign porn. Far from the pain of yes, and then you can say this is my avatar. But I ain't with a walking dog. In my mind is on the way out. Let me lay it out for you. At 14, a lawyer was a chosen path. Was a number map. Couldn't conceive of an invention that a rebel found Sawyer. But how did they respond notebooks? When the college pre-law, but I started happy hook. Couldn't let it be, switch the recipe it took. Every minute spice it took. These brought it to a slow cook, low flame, blood for a soul of people's history. Pumping into misery, all of the above. Plus look back. And if it's just upwards, there's no room to act. And we will say upwards and that'll be that. Please live your life. Not a lot of people want forever in a day, cause eternity, you see, a really long way. And a long windy road, and you get a little bumpy. Smoke down the ride, they expect their seats comfy. Isn't how it works, or at least the way I did it. Do what I was in for, yes I'm committed. But I admit it, there was more in store than a show with fat beats. More than I had hoped for, much more than a bargain. Walmart shopping, I am not just working out the knots. No clocks, so my heart won't harden. I know we had a shot, crack the biggest spots on the floor, can hurt queens. But both not stopping. Ever so often when God's ain't drunk, I want to leave with a head to for other options. Imagination active, intuition rotten. Plays with no passion, as an opposition stop on. Every day's a lesson on what chemistry's about. See, fire and heat, water, or cancel each other out. No, I'm not a prophet, but I'm sort of quote one in love. Nothing to show for, really until you show some. No one hurt more, you adore being here. No one you ignore, this song she won't hear. Language in a picture for her, no longer queer. I'm innocent, invisible man, my words in your face. So much I got no back, but the riches are words and some room to act. And we will say more words and not all get out. Please live your life. Your face is so much I can't look back. And the riches are words and some room to act. And we will say more words and not all get out. Please live your life. Mr. Novella. Where do we go when the soul sits restless? With a heart full of holes that we all just accepted. Worms squirm like toads in the cold. They've been eating at the bowl. Then your hemoglobin's home at the death wish. Trickles on the nose and the jones and the cans. And you hope you grow old and it gets a little better. But it won't if you can't find a hold on your brushes. And talk about a ring or a fling on the button. I'm at 10,000 things what I bring on a record. Pebbles that I swing into target because of method. Level in the field is as much about your yield to the greater energy as it is about the shield and the sword that you wield. See, dreaming is the recklessness, believing that everything we do isn't connected. I need the antiseptic to the virus that's infected. Every bit of thrive, every single drop of drive that I'm pouring in my phone. It's not no more I kept it. Thought I air Frank and Linus minus the blanket. No security in hands, we're really keeping still. Doctors even tell you that's the first way to get ill. Even will the still rust when we rest in the elements. I'm still I can't imagine it. Labels like elephants, unicorns and feathers, and speak to me in questions. The triggers have the vision while you're living in the present. Even though impressive bosses are never pleasant. And from this death of my edit will lead me to the best end. Will lead me to the best end. I'm here to live this life and transcend and face forward to can't look back. And if it's just my words, there's no room to act. And we will stand for words, and not only that. Please live your life. Young man, forward, I gotta look back. And if it's just my words, there's no room to act. And we will stand for words, and I don't be that. Please live your life. And we will stand for words, and I don't be that. And we will stand for words, and I don't be that. One more time. And we will stand for words, and I don't be that. One more time. And we will stand for words, and I don't be that.
I'm Dale Novella.
I am Calamine.
This is Where the Love Is. With Fiona Van. Let's give it up.
All right, that was Where the Love Is. If you didn't notice, Where the Love is Dale Novella and McCalamine. When we perform together, that's how we perform, under that moniker. And that was you.
Snaps, snaps, snaps. All the claps and applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're almost the end of our formal questions, right? And we have a really big question coming up, and we've kind of been dancing around it, as I told the panel while the video was playing. But there are a lot of isms that are involved in insecurity, right? Especially we can only speak as Americans. All of us are Americans. All of us are New Yorkers. Some of us have lived or were bred somewhere else, like me and Jade. But this is kind of seeped in to everything, regardless of where we are. So how has the white superiority complex, and it has a couple different names, but how has that played a role in making people of all races insecure?
should have led with this one. I mean, it's the very nature of everything we've been discussing. I mean, when you have one group of people that basically, I mean, since David was referencing, 90s hip hop earlier, I mean, a favorite line of mine from Third Base: "Black cats are bad luck. Bad guys wear black. Must have been a white guy who started all that." And then that one line encapsulates the type of damage and harm when you have one particular group of people being the deciders for what is right, what is righteous, what is okay, necessary, profitable, etc., etc. When we talk about white supremacy, we talk about it in these very strange, flat ways. White supremacy is not tiki torches and white hoods. White supremacy is basically the representations of anything that is normal being you, anything that is abnormal not being or being the other. It's literally the othering. When we talk about white supremacy, it's the philosophy, the ideology, the rules, all of those things being determined and dictated by one particular group of people without any actual debate, dialogue, or recourse. It's about renaming things. It's about appropriating things. It's about literally revising how things came to be in the origins of. So when we talk about supremacy, the violence isn't just about what happens physically, but it's more importantly what happens psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually. And that doesn't allow us to actually find the ability to create confidence, to create a belief and a motivation in yourself. If you only see yourself, and David can definitely relate to this as well, going back to what we were talking about, when you walk into a school and the only black men you see are the enforcers, the security, or the literal quote-unquote help, the lowest rungs within that structure, what does that say to any young black person that's in that school, what they can aspire to be? I did not have a single black teacher, man or woman, until college. The only reason why I could believe I could be an educator because I happened to have one at home because my father was one. But there was no model. There was no example. So I would literally have to use, which is incredibly powerful, that's a whole other podcast, my imagination to conceive of what it would be like. Her politics aside, and I don't want to get into it, but the fact that you have a Kamala Harris as VP, it's now you can have a young woman envision themselves at that high of a role. Could they do that before? Sure. But what evidence would they have had before Kamala Harris? They would have had to have made a superhuman leap because you're asking them to be the first. So when we think about those things, when we think about white supremacy and what it does and what it causes to insecurity, I think about things like that. When you do have, again, not really caring or having a critique about his politics, but when you have a President Obama in 2008, now you have young black children saying, oh, I can be president. They always could be president. They always could be president. The presidency is about competency. It's about leadership. It's about things that have nothing to do with the color of your skin. But when you have no representation or example therein, that leap of faith becomes that much harder to do. And that is systemically by design. So absolutely without question. And I think this is one of the most insidious things about white supremacy and why it still maintains to this day and is not going anywhere, because there is no other way in order for you to quote unquote be able to win outright if you do not have individuals that actually can feel and believe they have a chance and the ability to achieve, because they don't have the examples. You can't keep winning if people actually, well, I know I can do it because somebody else just did it. Like, you already got beat. So I know I can win. It's going to be maintained. So it's inherent. That's chapter and verse. That is it.
Or even if you don't see them as being like, they look like me, you might be, there's nepotism always. So then the gatekeepers keep getting replaced by people who look like them and not letting anyone else in, right? Or people who are related to them. And you can't get in if you're anyone else, and that feeds all the other systematic things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meredith, what do you think? What are you thinking?
I've just been thinking that the white superiority complex maybe is also the white insecurity complex, and
Mhm.
the white man's fear of like, what do I have to give stuff up to let
Mhm.
other people come forward and be equal? um it's all insecurity, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's me of Toni Morrison's words. I'm not going to do a great job paraphrasing them, but there's two interviews she did with Charlie Rose in back in the day that I revisit every once in a while. And one of them, she says, you know, like she's not carrying the burden of racism isn't on her essentially, and you know, white folks who really buy into this dynamic, yeah, what Meredith was saying, like, what are you? She basically asked out loud, "What are you without this?" And James Baldwin talks about it too. Who are you? What are you without this clinging to this hate, this identity? Are you any good? Or, you know, are you special? Are you loved? I definitely advise folks finding that interview. Um, yeah, there's other thoughts I have, but I'm interested to hear other folks' thoughts on.
I mean, I think everybody said it collectively, uh, but just to re-say it, right? You know, the the white. I don't like superiority complex, inferiority complex. Like the dominance of white culture has othered everything else, everything that's not it, and in doing that has created the insecurity of being not normal. You know, and it is done it does a disservice to white people as much as it does a disservice. Well, not as much, but it also does a disservice to white people, right? Because kind of what David was referencing with the Toni Morrison and James Baldwin is like white people uh, are left defenseless without the superiority of that dominance, right? Like they don't know what to do when they're not centered. That's why, like, you know, in my experience, like white people, one of the biggest transgressions you can do for them is not to include them. If they are unincluded from something, they take it as the greatest offense. You know, that's why there's like, why there's a BET and not a, it's like, yo, you have TV. You have TV. You don't need to be part of BET. You don't need to be part of. You don't need to be. You don't need to have to wear other people's headdress. You don't need to have to do that. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, but just because going back to my original point about like the freedom that comes with like being able to do whatever you want wherever you want. When you finally do reach some level of restriction, it starts feeling like oppression. You know, like even like however you feel about the N word, right? However you feel about it, whether you think people should say it or shouldn't say it, like it shouldn't be a discussion that whether you think black people should say it or shouldn't say it. It shouldn't be a discussion that should white people say it if black people have decided that they don't want you to. It's like why is that something to fight for? If black people have said we don't want you to say this, like what are you really fighting for when you fight for the right to say it? You're just fighting for the right to ignore the wishes of a certain people, right? You know, if you went into a Native American village and it was like, hey, don't wear our headdress because it means something to us, right? And it's like, oh, but you wear it. It's like, but we're telling you it means something different to us, so we're asking you to respect us, you know. But it's like the loss of privilege will always feel like oppression to the privileged. You know, the loss when you are allowed to go wherever you want, the moment you are restricted, it feels like oppression. You know, the moment you don't have the full luxuries that you've always had, you know, it's like uh if you're used to driving a luxury car, if you get a Toyota a Toyota Camry with just a base model, you'd be like, this is this is a travesty. You know, it's like you still got a car, you can still go where you want to go, but it's like, but it's not what you're used to. So you know, and that's kind of like where we're at with society is like white even the most empathetic, caring white people, I don't think are prepared for a world where they are not centered. Same thing with men. Men are not prepared for the world where they are not centered, where like our fantasies aren't presented to us in every form of media, where we're not catered to in every instance of our lives. Like we might honestly want and fight for the equality of women and people who have been othered. We might like genuinely want that, but there's no way we could be possibly prepared for a world where we are not the center, because we've never experienced it. We don't even know what is going to happen. We don't even know what it's going to feel like for us, and that's the biggest obstacle, I think, for a lot of progress.
And even though, I guess, man, it's like I have three things in my head, but I really want to focus on. Look, we can, and I think should. I think that there's always room for this question and this conversation, undoubtedly, because it plays an active role in our daily existence. Having said that, gosh, Baxter, I love what you said. Just this literally about the being included, yo. Just that. Like, why didn't you even? I, I didn't consider us. And then sometimes too, and yes, I'm generalizing. It's not. It's a declaration of wanting to be included, but then once they're in the room, well, why aren't I leading this? Like, I'm an expert. I have an expertise. Do you though? Do you? Anyway, separately from that, I am doing work personal because I'm not ready for this, right? It's like I've been indoctrinated my whole life. Okay, sure, I can be aware of that, but I don't know exactly how I've been complicit in manifesting in all ways and yada yada. But at the same time, I'm personally trying to find and be more interested in develop relationships with, right, away from the transactional component of it, develop relationships with um, folks. Folks who look like me for sure. That's always been there, but even like um, I don't know, just allying with other folks who have been marginalized within this dynamic. Because again, there is we have imagination, but also there are customs that I'm not privy to currently. There are customs that I'm learning about, that aren't necessarily aesthetic, right? It could be ways of what we consider economics. It could be technology, what are technologies, even though they're not conventional, kind of like I don't know, brick and mortar items. There's ways of thinking that currently exist. There's exchanges happening. I've been doing some studying. Not an expert, but things happening within these borders, things happening in the Middle East, specifically a region of Syria. There are people who are on smaller scales living out the reimagining, and I think what it's helping to teach me, right? Like, I'm always going to be some sort of idealist to an extent, and mix that idealism with a healthy dose of cynicism, if you will, and practicality. However, what it's teaching me is I no longer prescribe to saying like, "Oh, I want to change the world." Like me, David, I want to change the world, right? Whether it's with a poem or a Facebook post or whatever. It's more like, I think about that conversation with Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. There was clips that have been floating around YouTube for a couple of years, and finally I saw there's a 2-hour interview.
Yeah.
And I recommend people see that. And I finally saw it, and man, Nikki Giovanni resonates with me in the instance where she's like, "Look, I get it, like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to fix the world too, but." What I'm focusing on, paraphrasing her, and also talking about what's making sense to me is, first, and some of you have brought this up already, I got to take care of me. I can't. How can I take care of anyone else? How can I give from an empty well, right? Okay, so I got to take care of me. That's not. Sometimes selfish isn't all negative. And then how can I look out for, my immediate family or my loved ones, like chosen family or blood or whatever. And then hopefully, like if I can take care of my corner here, and then you can take care of yours over there, and then we can exchange resources. Doesn't mean we have to do things exactly the same way, right? But we're all finding ways to take care of our respective pockets, and then hopefully that kind of ripples out, as opposed to, well, I have to be, because I didn't realize this was a function of this white supremacist delusion of I have to be the one who changes the world. I am the
Yep.
hero dynamic. I need to say I am the savior. I'm a savior who needs someone to be saved, right? All that bullshit, as opposed to saying, oh, people actually know what they want. We just haven't really
Yeah.
given a shit about hearing about following through, because it's work we don't want to do. I already have a predetermined notion of what they need, even though it's not what doesn't match with what they want, but it's easier to execute. No, if we actually just shut the fuck up and listened, and then did the work to build that infrastructure, that's what I'm interested in. So I'm less interested in what white folks are thinking, and I'm more interested in, like, all right, what do we got to do? Because I'm ready to get shit done. I'm kind of tired of talking about it, even though I
Yeah.
love this and your conversation.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. And thank you all so much for your opinions. We did have one last video, but I want to go ahead and get everyone's final words because we're running out of time. So what do you want our audience to take away from this conversation? Just like one sentence.
I want to. So this is. I want to say something that Macau said to me maybe a few years ago that like has been one of the most impactful things that have ever resonated with me, and it's like Jesus washed his followers' feet. You know what I'm saying? And it's like the most satisfying life, insecurities aside, the most fulfilling thing you can do is to be in service of other people, like whether it's in the grand scheme or whether it's like on a very like microscopic, like not microscopic but like a very like socially local level, right? Like if you're insecure about whatever, even in the white superior power, like just get up and go find somebody who needs something and like help them get it. You know what I'm saying? Go out there and pick up the trash that's on your right in front of your block, like
Yeah.
and like you'll find your way doing that. That's where I'm at in life. That's what I believe. Is like everybody wants to be Angela Davis. Everybody wants to be Huey Newton. Everybody wants to be Fred Hampton. But Huey Newton and Angela Davis and Fred Hampton were just trying to help people. So it's like just get out there and like serve somebody. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
And I think I would like to add to that. My final thought is like in being in service of people, I'm going to bring it back to what we were saying before, doing it with love and really like authentic, genuine love for your community, for your people, whatever that means for you.
Yes. Thank you, Meredith.
And Macau, I'm
No,
leaving the last word to you. No, I'm leaving the last word to you, brother. Not me. So, something I saw a couple of years ago at like a conference thing on a table. Someone wrote out, "The answers are in the room," and that stayed with me. And I believe it. Like we don't need external validation for stuff we already intuitively know, and that has been devalued or dismissed. The answers are already in the room. The only thing I'll add to that now, considering Dale, the media component you've brought in to this is like, you know what? The answers are in the room, and they don't always need to be broadcast, right? I'll just say that. We can take care of people. Don't need to know all our moves. So that's all I'll say. And thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank all of y'all, and thank you, Baxter. I had forgotten about that conversation. I think I just want to leave people that might listen to this podcast and people in general with you're enough, and that's really it. You're enough. There's nothing outside of who you are that will define you. I often tell my young people that they're great I try to tell them as much as possible because they are. I try to tell Dale every day that she's great because she is. My friends, I try to tell them that they're great because they are. And that you're enough. You're enough, and you'll get to where you want to be and need to be when the time is that. But you just have to know that where you are is where you're supposed to be at any given point, and just to keep on and not worry as much about the things that are out of your control and outside of you. So yeah, that's it. Thank y'all.
Yes, thank everyone. Thank you, Macau, for your final thoughts. I would like to say that I hope everyone remembers that we are all connected. We are all connected to the divine and to each other, and our actions impact other people, whether we realize it or not, you know? And so to take care of ourselves, and to take care of ourselves is taking care of other people as well. Jade, did you have any final thoughts? I know you don't like to talk. You're like, I'm the producer.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just a producer. Just appreciate yourself. Everybody's trying hard, so just give yourself a break and appreciate breathing and eating. I'm at a place where I appreciate everything. I love the fact that I wake up every morning with my girlfriend. We make coffee, and yeah, this is just awesome. Yeah, and then we tell each other we appreciate each other all the time, and it helps feel loved. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, all of our panelists for being here. Thank you, our audience, for listening. And I hope, the conversation is going to continue, not broadcast, as David said, or just in general. And I hope the conversation continues on the other end as well. So thank you. And that's been the Poet Podcast. I'm your host, Dale Novella, and we'll see you next time.
Be free. Oh, there we go. That's the remedy. Okay. Wait. These are good fortune. We did not come for proportion. We will not be distracted by reality TV and fashions. These G's be flexing while we still fighting for the basic rights. They just want attention, they never been loved right. Get your motherfucking life. Hold up, 3 shots of the hip rock. Got me on my ball with the bar, no kid rock. Caught my bike from a feet, no seat, no kickstop. Can you get a ride, kick a rock? I'm the Red Bull giving wings to my flock. Bumping Q-tips till I breathe stop. And everything I drop high, and everything I hit, all besides.
That's the job that used to shine shoes. On the step of the radio station, WRDW. I think we started 3 steps. 5, 6, never get to that. But today, I own that radio station. You know what that is?
What am I? 3 shots to the hip rock. Got me on my ball with the bar, no kick rock. I caught my bike from a machine, no seat, no kick stop. Get a ride, kick a rock. I'm the Red Bull giving wings to the block. Bumping Q-tip till we breathe stop. And everything I drop high. Everything is lit, no besides. Nobody believes in us. Flies I am, they clutching their purse while they walk down the street from us. They can't even bleed to us. I'm in too deep, brother. 6 levels of passion, the rocks immaculate. Somebody tell the landlord that. As a youth, cops inside my school, trying to recruit. Same ones outside projects, and them in taking it, trying to shoot at us. Even cookies all over my computer, they tracking my movements, bruh. All from numbers, I don't know, like who this, bruh? Send them to the voicemail. Sally made on my coattails. Underground, but we third rail. And I ain't skinny, I'm lean. Cop hella clothes, but are you clean? On the inside, right how the songs, the fuck you mean? 3 shots in the hip rock, got me on my ball with the bar, no kick rock. Cop bike from a beam, no seat, no kick stop. Can you get a ride, kick a rock? I'm the Red Bull giving wings to the block. Bumping Q-tip till we breathe stop. Everything we drop by, everything is lit, no besides. Hey.
some noise. If you're happy to be alive, just put a hand in the air. Glad that everybody has a hand in the air. I would have been worried. My name is Baxter Wordsworth. This is the poet. Sometimes I feel like I'm Andre 3000. When I come around, son, ask where's my album. Some say took a vow of silence like devout monks. Some bang on my old sounds like some loud drums. Wow. Proud to announce new music coming out, starting from the bottom, building from the ground up. Yo, yelling cowabunga when I crowd surf. No, before crowds run, I'd rather couch surf from the underground dirt. Sowing seeds, growing stems, leaves through the semen of your town church. Worship the pen that scribbles a blissful hymn. Great universal verses, my girl was a crystal gem. Kiss amber, smoke amethyst rock, some hot like lit candle wicks mixed with sick cancer sticks. Rain, sleep, inhale, exhale, chemtrails posted on the corner moving letters like exhale. Put your hands up high if you feel the vibe. This is the poet will be televised. It's all honest, I ain't telling no lies. Welcome, the poet will be televised. That's right, oh good, you're feeling alive. This is the poet will be televised. This is the poet will be televised, 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 televised. Make sure you tag the list if you wanna rock. Bad feeling, well it's bound to dissolve. Me, I just found profound new resolve. That's right, I be down for the cause. Can you please give this band a freaking round of applause? They dope as shit though. Switch it out like a schizo. It was like your Baxter. You know you gon' rock it from the top, from the get-go. I was like, yeah, let your mama and them kids know. They was like he jumping, like he skip rope. And it's just getting dope. Yeah, don't get dope. I would like to bring to the stage